I believe it started when I was around 6 years old. My parents often had friends over in the house. I didn't know they were polyamorous OFC. One day I was outside playing, got hurt, and when I ran inside caught my parents making out with some random guy. They told me they have other adults that they love and it's a completely normal thing. Me being a child just accepted that. They gave up being secretive and their partners would constantly be around, even joining on outings. I remember that on my 10th birthday they invited 3 of their partners, one of who I'd never seen before. And for the rest of the day my parents just withdrew from my party and hung out with them. I never saw them doing anything explicit again, but they would kiss their partners, hug them, make flirty comments. Something that would be normal between parents, but with many more people. Sometimes I came home from school and my parents were gone and there was some random adult in our house. Some of them seemed surprised that my parents even had a child. I always hated it, but since my parents had told me this was normal, I assumed many adults probably did similar things and that it's just an adult thing all kids hate. Later they had less partners and eventually seemed to stop. Not that I'd know for sure. I moved out with 17. I didn't think about it anymore. A year ago I started therapy, other reasons. As usual the topic of my upbringing came up and it brought back many feelings I wasn't aware of. I realized that although my parents were always good to me, I had never really felt close to any of them and still have a lot of resentment, that they made me feel like I had to compete for my parents' attention with random strangers. A while ago, I visited them and they told me they are going to take part in a documentary about polyamorous families, and that the producers would like to include interviews with the children. So they would love if I could agree and tell everyone that polyamory doesn't mess kids up. All my resentment bubbled up and I said that I cannot agree because I would not be able to say anything positive. My parents looked shocked. I had never brought this up before, and asked why, and I unloaded all, that I always felt pushed aside. We barely had any family time without strangers intruding. It turned into an argument and I became loud and yelled that the truth is it did me up and they shouldn't have had a child. My mother cried and my father said I should probably leave. So I left and was shaken up for the rest of the week, but also felt regret because I've never made my mom cry before. Later my father sent me a message that was like, "We are sorry you feel that way. Can we have a calm discussion about this soon?" Even though I tried to, it's like I can't reply. This argument brought something very emotional up in me. I'm in a relationship with a guy who also works in tech. He makes $68K and I make $130K. I am a mechanical engineer at a robotics startup. He works at a more stable job doing programming at a large company. He brought me to meet his friends at a party and they asked me about myself. His friends mostly work in tech too and talked about themselves in terms of their jobs. I told them I'm an hiker, I do archery, I love road trips and camping and riding dirt bikes, etc. Basically talking about my hobbies because work is just a way to get paid to do the shit I love. It's not how I define myself and it doesn't come to mind when someone wants me to tell them about myself. One of his friends asked about work and I said, "Oh gosh, I don't want to talk about work at a party." Spent my whole day sweating my ass off in 95-degree heat trying to replace this busted-ass motor just to find the replacement. I wasn't lying or trying to downplay that I have a good job, that really is how I spent my day. And I wasn't in the mood to talk shop at a party. Some other conversations came up casually that probably also made me seem poorer, like me saying that car dealership repairs were a ripoff, and telling my boyfriend that my childhood neighbor's trailer caught on fire and I was gonna visit and help her out. I wasn't doing it on purpose. I was literally just talking about my life, but I guess I gave the impression I was poorer. It got later in the night, everyone was getting drunker, and some of his friends, not close ones though, were making jokes about me growing up in a trailer and being a gold digger, and being ready to jump to a richer guy. Really misogynistic shit honestly, since they don't even know me and seem to just assume all girls are good diggers. He didn't say anything. He later said it was because he'd smoked weed and gets quiet and has trouble carrying on a quick conversation when he's high. But regardless, I felt hurt he didn't say anything. I got irritated with his friends and asked, "Now why the hell would you say that when I make twice what he does?" His friends went quiet for a second and I continued, "There ain't no gold to dig here, not with him or anyone at this party. So do y'all think I'm cheap? Or do y'all think? My boyfriend wanted to leave the party shortly after, and he was pretty upset with me for telling everyone I make twice what he does. I said I would have held my tongue if he'd checked his friends himself. But he didn't say anything, so I wasn't about to let them talk to me like that. He said it was humiliating, and now everyone thinks I'm a. And I flippantly said at least they know I'm a rich. He was angry. I embarrassed him when I spoke up. I was angry I had to say anything at all because his friends were talking shit, so it should be on him to check them. My sister-in-law and I have an agreement. She watches my kids 3 days a week, and I watch hers 3 days a week. This agreement has stood since March 2020 without issues. Any changes have been discussed weeks in advance. A couple weeks ago, we had an argument. The next day, I brought my kids to her house, dropped them off, and left. I didn't speak to my sister-in-law, because when one of us is in a rush, like I was, it's standard for us to just let the kids out, stay in the car, and drive off when you see the door open. I drove to work, about 40 minutes away. When I got there, I had about 20 missed calls, and even more texts, all from my sister-in-law, all saying she didn't want to watch the kids given our argument. Her first text arrived a little before I got to her place. But I didn't see it until I got to work because my phone is always on silent when I drive. I rang her, said I'll arrange to work from home, then come get the kids. She said I have 45 minutes to get back to her place or she would call the police. I told my supervisor the situation, and she said I could leave after I did a few things. This delayed me 20 minutes. When I got back to my sister-in-law's, just over an hour later, she said she'd already called the police when the 45 minutes ran out. I then had to stick around long enough to tell the officer that I didn't abandon my children, there was just a communication issue. Sister-in-law and I had another shouting match later over this. I arranged other childcare for my kids and I've been mostly ignoring her since. However, she reached out and apologized, and has asked if I'd be willing to go back to the old childcare arrangement. I work with kids. If I got child abandonment on my record, I would never work in my field again, which she knew. And her calling the police was a massive overreaction, so if she needs a babysitter she can go whistle for all I care. She said that if I checked my phone, talked to her that morning, or came back when I was supposed to, she would not have needed to call the police, and I did this to myself. As she gave me a warning with that first text, and I could have checked my phone or spoken to her directly when I got to her place. All of which she says she would have done if she were in my position, given that we'd argued the night before. I've told her that if she thinks I'm babysitting for her, she's delusional, and she's on her own. Because of my refusal, it's looking like she may have to quit her job because my brother and her would pay more for a babysitter than they would earn from her working. My mother and brother have both called me an arsehole because there were no consequences to her calling the police, and that while she overreacted, she's apologized, so if I really forgive her, I'll let us move on. This income loss would also mean that she, my brother, and my niece and nephew might need to move somewhere cheaper. That my brother might have to take on extra hours at work. And in an extreme scenario they may even be completely unable to live independently, meaning they'd have to move in with her parents, who live several hours away. I'm a 19-year-old F with 6 older siblings. My parents spent most of my childhood spending money they didn't have on my siblings, so by the time I hit my teenage years, I realized I was probably going to have to fend for myself financially when I turn 18. I started babysitting and doing odd jobs around my neighborhood when I was 14, and eventually got part-time jobs during the school year. By the time I was 16, I was working 3 jobs in the summer and 2 in addition to school. When my parents told me they couldn't pay for college, I'd already earned enough, along with scholarships, to be able to put myself through college and have plenty left over. I've continued to work during the school year, and have been able to make money during quarantine by tutoring online. The issue began a few months ago, when my eldest sister got married. My parents spent 30 grand on her wedding, taking out a second mortgage to do so. To make matters worse, my dad was furloughed 6 days after the wedding. They'd effectively dug themselves into a hole they couldn't get out of. 2 weeks ago, my mom texted me for the first time since the wedding. She didn't say hi, ask how I was, or make any small talk. She just said, "Your dad and I need a favor. When can we call you?" I'd expected this. None of my elder siblings are doing well financially, and they've exhausted all other loan options, both from family and the bank. I figured they would text me, ask me to loan them a few thousand, and promise to pay it back when they could figure things out. I was absolutely willing to pitch in a few thousand, and had even considered giving them some of my tutoring jobs so they could make some extra cash. I was not, however, expecting them to demand I give them all the money, close to $40,000. I'd made from the ages of 14 to 18. The exact statement my mom had made was, "You made that money under our roof. We were the ones who allowed you to work, so you only have it because of us anyway. We bought you food and clothes for 18 years. That money is only a fraction of what you owe us," and so on. I said that food, clothes, and shelter were the very minimum. It's what they signed up for when they chose to become parents. I didn't ask for any of it, etc. They responded by telling me that if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have the life I have today. I said they were being ridiculous, and hung up. Since that day, both, along with 2 of my siblings, have continuously hounded me about giving them what is rightfully theirs. My siblings, who have never been asked to give them money, are still professing that it's my job as their kid to take care of them. I told them they wouldn't see a cent of my hard-earned money, and have no right to make such a request. I'm torn. I feel awful for refusing to help them out, but on the other hand, this was their fault. I feel I shouldn't be responsible for fixing their mess.